So there is a need for applying common and general requirements as established by ISO 17029 in specific scopes. So in this particular field we are talking about the scope of organization and particularly the performance of organization in the field of sustainability.
Accreditation is a way of life.
One of the actions that organizations are taking is to focus on issues of pressing importance.
What the customers really want out of their accredited certification.
I believe we have an impact on everyday's life.
It's important to be inclusive. It is important really to be open.
And that will be one additional way to ensure that the voice of industry and user is heard and recognized.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Emanuele Riva, the chair of IF. Today I'm here with Cesare Saccani, the president of Diligenza. Please, Cesare.
Diligenza is an Italian association focused on sustainability and corporate responsibility, and we have been honored to be involved and to manage, to convene the working group number 2 of IF Sustainability Commission working group.
Yes, IF had the idea to establish a new working group in the executive focused on sustainability. There are 3 streamlines. One is this one that is convened by Cesare. So today Cesare will explain the goal of this working, of these specific subgroups. Other 2 groups are focused on the carbon market and the other on the management on the scheme of sustainability. So the idea is of IF was to have an advisory committee, advisory group of people open to stakeholders, open to people also outside IF, in order to have ideas, to connect it, to be in the good position to understand what is sustainability and also to change the market on sustainability. So, Cesare, which is this working group that you are dealing, which are the main topics that the working group is managing?
Well, the most important objective of this group is to explore and to highlight and to study and to propose documents and position paper in the field of corporate sustainability information. Why? Because there is an increasing demand worldwide on this type of information coming from the regulatory framework, coming from different stakeholders, financial institutions like banks and investors, buyers, and also public bodies, and also in tendering procedures. So there is an increasing demand for accurate, reliable, credible, and comparable information on sustainability of organizations.
So is it correct, can we say that this sustainability information can be considered as a claim? Is it correct to define this part of conformity assessment activity as a verification of claims?
Yes, absolutely, because both of them, I would say that first of all we need to realize that there is a convergence worldwide on the regulatory framework as regard to ESG ratings and sustainability reporting. Both of them can be considered as 2 different sides of a single coin. And what makes them different from other type of claims? Number one is the fact that the requirements and this type of information on sustainability must be based on performance. So there is an important issues related to the performance of a company. Which type of performance? The most important performance is risk. Risk, as OECD established 10 years ago, risk of adverse impacts on organization and their stakeholders due to sustainability aspects such as governance, social, health and safety, environment, and business ethics. So there is an increasing demand for this type of claims to be verified and to be provided to stakeholders in a reliable and credible way.
So, following your idea, so if this is a claim, the standard used for the validation of claims is ISO 1729. So this should be the correct standard that has to be used in this area. I can understand that is a new standard, is new one, so there is not so much experience. Also the culture and the knowledge of the accreditation body and the market, of course, is not high as in other standards. It's easy to speak about certification of product, certification of person, but of course, when you're entering a new field, it's always difficult, is a challenge. However, we can say that this is the standard that's suitable for this kind of activity, because, as you said, is an evaluation of a performance, so it's not evaluation of the characteristics of something, but it's really the evaluation if the claim given by, in this case, by an organization is correct or not. So we can agree that 1729 is the correct document for this activity. So which are now, we are using now this 1729 that is underlined a lot the involvement of stakeholders, because if you have a claim and this claim has to be verified, you need to have the endorsement of stakeholders, you need to have the knowledge of the market, and the market has to recognize the value of the claim. So how is working in this area?
The main features of the standards, number one, we need to clarify that these standards aims to meet two different needs. First one is to define requirements for certification body, for third-party bodies, validation and verification bodies. And secondly, from this angle, most importantly, the evaluation of programs, because ISO 17029 requires a program. This is the original part of this standard if compared with other standards used for accreditation such as 17021, ISO 17020, and so on and so forth. This program requires a program to be applied. Why a program? Because there are many different types of claims, and the scope of this standard covers product, processes, services, and organizations. So there is a need for applying common and general requirements as established by ISO 17029 in specific scopes. So in this particular field, we are talking about the scope of organization and particularly the performance of organization in the field of sustainability. And again, in terms of performance. So this makes original this standard. I would say in a few minutes the main features of this standard. Number one, the standards define very well the process to evaluate a claim in different phases. Secondly, it establishes and requires program to define the competencies of people conducting an audit. And thirdly, the decision process and the requirements for validation verification bodies. So these three are the pillars. I would say that in this particular field, the most important features is having a robust audit conducted by a competent person. Robust means that if we talk about risks or better, risk having a future impact on the organization and their stakeholders, part of the audit must be carried out at site. So this is, in my opinion, the cornerstone of this in this particular field. May not be necessary in other fields, but in this particular field, the audit must be conducted at site by a competent person. And ISO 17029 meets these requirements and cover very well these requirements.
So in this area is very easy to do greenwashing. So the main risk is the greenwashing. And this is important that we have a robust standard recognized worldwide as ISO 17029, a robust accreditation program, scheme, recognized by the stakeholder, developed with all the members, in this case members of IF, and a scheme, requirements and the rules that are applied in the same way worldwide. So this is also the role of accreditation at the end. We as accreditation body, we guarantee that things are doing in a well way, so they are well managed, that there is a trust in what the conformity assessment body is doing. So we provide the trust that things are managed correctly. And of course, the trust is important for the person that will use the claim, they will use this with declaration. As you can imagine, banks, investors, and so on. So the trust is the key element that will make a link between the activity that has to be done and the accreditation body that guarantee the role of the certification body. So it's important to underline that without the trust, we will have no value. And it's important also because in this field, we are entering in connection with regulators. In Europe, we know that there is a directive, the CSRD directive. Maybe I give you the opportunity to explain just a bit why it's so important the connection between what we are doing now and the directive in Europe, and also in other countries, but Europe in this moment is the first one that is starting.
In Europe, the directive 2020-2464 has been approved right on December 22nd, and it's going to introduce an important rule for corporate and organization, because step by step, from big companies to small and medium enterprises, I mean from companies with more than 500 people to companies with more than 50 people, in few years will be requested to prepare a corporate sustainability reporting in compliance with internationally recognized standard. In Europe, the standard setter, mandatory standard setter recognized by the European Commission is EFRAG, and they are preparing the standard ESRS, but other standards are working worldwide, such as GRI or IFRS in the Anglo-Saxon world. But most importantly, beyond preparing a sustainability reporting, the CSRD directives requires to have a third-party conformity assessment of such report. And this third-party assessment must be conducted by three different type of subjects: auditors, audit firms, and accredited bodies. It's important to underline that all the three players admitted by the directive to conduct a third-party assessment of the sustainability reporting will have the same value, legal value, and this third-party assessment will become part of the balance sheet. So it will be enclosed to the balance sheet. So profit and loss, balance sheet, and the note. And the fourth document will be the sustainability reporting. Therefore, it will become very important, and up beyond, at present, the market, the European market for this type of assurance is estimated roughly in 40,000 companies, but it must be underlined that all these 40,000 companies will be requested also to explain what they are doing in their supply chain. So it means that there will be a further chain of trust, using your word, because we will need, and companies will need to provide information about what they are doing to prevent risks down the supply chains that may have impacts on themselves and their stakeholders. So there will be an important evolution, and then I would say, I would conclude, and I would not forget the relevance of the effort of the European Commission in combining this directive already approved with a directive that will be approved probably within the end of this year, introducing a mandatory due diligence on organizations. So these are twin directives that must be read jointly, because both of them requires an assessment, a third-party assessment on organizations and mandatory due diligence on their supplier as regards to social, environmental, and other aspects. So this will create a huge and increasing demand for this type of information to be verified according to a robust quality infrastructure, standardization, accreditation, and third-party conformity assessment.
It's important now to understand that Europe started with these twin directives, as you said, but it's not the only one. So now other regions are looking at this example, this model, and it's important that we set now the rules that will be used also for from the others. So this is historically is a moment very important, because we are putting the base, I guess, for the future legislation also in other continents, in other regions. So it's important that we follow carefully what's happening now in Europe. So, and what could be, for example, the benefits for the buyers for this kind of declaration?
I would say that the IAF is playing a crucial role from this perspective, because the type of information and the type of accuracy, reliability, and credibility of our sustainability information will have a huge impact on international trades and also in international investments. For instance, if an Italian buyer needs to have reliable information on a Chinese supplier or an Indian supplier or a Brazilian supplier, there is a need to have a local body conducting an assessment on a local company, on a local supplier, and this type of information should be acceptable for the European market. So whenever you need to select a buyer, or whenever you need to invest money, European money, in extra-EU companies or vice versa, there will be a need for this type of information. And the role of IAF is crucial, because the role is exactly to create a common framework for different companies in different areas worldwide, and exactly because IAF may ensure the mutual recognition of results of conformity assessment. This will be very important to create a common platform for bilateral trade, multilateral trade and investment.
It's important. So also in this case, even if this directive is just limited to Europe, the contamination in the market is not just only European, but it's also outside the border of Europe. So it's important to understand that it's not a matter for Europe, it's a matter worldwide. But this is for the private investment. Do you think that this could be also have an effect for the public procurement? At least we are in Italy, we are in Accredia. There is a huge legislation in Italy, at least for the public procurement. So it could be interesting to see if there is maybe a possible connection also to the public procurement.
Absolutely yes, because in Europe, the European regulation on public procurement is now moving towards the green public procurement. And green public procurement means to select, first of all, to introduce criteria, and secondly, to select counterparts on the basis of social, environmental, and other aspects, for instance, health and safety, or also business ethics and governance. So from this angle, more and more regulation will introduce in the tendering procedures criteria to address purchasing processes and tender procedures towards sustainability. In Italy, we have a very good example because in Italy, for the first, in my opinion, as far as I know, there is the first legislation introducing in an Italian tendering procedure law the so-called CAM, so environmental criteria to select companies. And for instance, in the first regulation as regards to construction, it has been introduced a specific criteria requiring or adding a value for those bidders having a third-party validation of their ESG rating on the basis of ISO 17029 issued by an accredited body. So in Italy, this is the first time, as far as I know, in Europe that the regulation on public tender reward companies having this type of third-party conformity assessment. And I would say that the Ministry of Economic Development has been doing a very relevant job in this.
Yes. So, to conclude, IAF is about to publish this position paper, this brochure, that will help understanding better what's going on in this area on sustainability, specific for the claims. It was not easy. Maybe it's months that we are working on this document with the involvement of many stakeholders, and also it was difficult to make clear which was the meaning also 7029, why it's important the claim in this field, why to use a program or not. So we had a lot of discussion. So I'm happy that we are very close to the publication of this document that will be very useful. I don't know if you want to give short final remarks on.
I just want to underline one important topic. Also, the banking regulation is moving towards the same direction because in Europe, the European Banking Authority has been publishing 2 different documents, and these documents require European banks to create a link between an ESG rating and the credit risk. And this will become mandatory from 2024, so many banks are moving in this way. And this accreditation system could provide them exactly what the European Banking Authority is demanding. So they need to have more reliable information as regards to sustainability at the counterpart level. This is very important. So it means every company by company, there will be a need to have reliable information on their exposure to ESG risks. And this evaluation should be assured possibly by a third party. Why? Because banks must demonstrate to the local, to the national banking authority how they granted the loan on the basis of which information. And having a third party evaluation could help them in applying the regulation. So in my opinion, the IAF work is meeting the needs of different stakeholders and of course the regulatory framework as well.
Okay. Thank you, Cesare. It was very helpful and a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for your invitation.